Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Open Discussion Podcast. I have a very special, I got to change this intro, sir. I keep saying special, but you way past special. A special guest with me here today, Lieutenant Major General retired Todd McCaffrey. 34 years, over 34 years of military service. An infantryman, we're going to discuss that, sir. I'll tell you, you're going to at least branch FA, but you branch infantry, so we're going to discuss that one-on-one, sir. 34 years military service, served as a training director of training over the Pentagon, served as deputy commanding general and chief of staff over 25th Infantry Division. I did fall under 25th ID once when I was in Alaska. I was in the division, sir. And then you served as a division commander for 1st Army Division East, and then chief of staff to United States Army Africa Command, senior director for strategic partnership for the military and government program at the University of South Carolina, a board member, a consultant that ran his own firm, and currently serving as the Secretary of Veterans Affairs for the state of South Carolina that employed over hundreds and hundreds of employees and served about 360,000, I think, veterans, if I'm not mistaken, sir. So welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, thanks very much, and I certainly appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate you, sir. We were just discussing. I never get to really say thanks to you because when I first transitioned a couple of years ago, somebody we both know, outstanding leader, in my opinion, Lieutenant General T.J. Thompson told me about you, and I reached out to you, sent you an email without no hesitation. You responded right away. You know, we got on the call and you provide some good advice and good recommendation. I just want to say thanks, sir, for doing that because you had other things going on. You took the time to talk to me. I really appreciate you, sir. Thanks for that. I really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thanks for reaching out. It's always good to be able to reach out and talk to another veteran. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, sir. So I was fortunate, sir, to go down to West Point twice when I was back at 82nd Airborne Division. We usually go over there for the cadet summer training, right? And I went over there and we were placed over at Camp Natural Bridge. You heard about it? You've been there a couple of times. And then for some reason, one of the officers came and talked to me. You know, he said, are you interested in being attacked? You know, I didn't know what attack is, like attack NCO to work there, whatever. But looking at Camp Natural Bridge and Highland Falls, I told him, hell no, because I just didn't get it, right? So a couple of years later, I went to become ROTC instructor, and I understood the whole section command. And I just want to start from the beginning, sir. Over 34 years of service, went to West Point because not everybody get into West Point. Really, the best of the best. I applied. They said I was not smart enough. They kicked my application out of there. They accepted you. So what was the contributing factor, sir, to say, I'm going to go to West Point and try this Army thing? What was the whole motivation behind it?
Yeah, here's a funny story. The reality is I didn't want to go to West Point. I wanted to go to the Naval Academy.
I
didn't get into the Naval Academy, and I actually spent a year in college at Naval ROTC trying to, again, get in the Naval Academy. Someone in the process suggested, hey, you ought to apply to West Point as well, just kind of as a backup option in case this Navy
That's a backup.
Navy did not work out. So many years ago, I wound up at West Point kind of accidentally after originally the Navy. So that's the true story. I'm a recovering midshipman, a soldier that now Navy.
That's amazing, sir. That's amazing. So serving have always been something you wanted to do. I mean, in terms of the Navy or the Army, is something that anybody within your family line serve, or something you just say, I'm just going to do this. How did it come about?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. It's interesting. That question gets asked a lot, and I don't know exactly how it came. I think there's always something. You're always influenced by people around you. My father was not career military. He spent a few years in the Navy as a young enlisted sailor at the time. But I always had this kind of fascination of kind of military kind of structure and equipment and kind of the kind of things you grow up in. I grew up in the 70s, really, 60s and 70s. So I'm an old guy, but I think it was kind of attracted me for some of that. And then as I got into it, of course, there were a whole bunch of things that it's challenging. And as I got older, of course, it got into the issue of it kept you young. I mean, you get to work with young people. It's exciting. You get to do some interesting things. And just kind of, but it never started off as this desire to serve for an entire career. That kind of evolved. I talk about it a lot. That was not my original plan.
That's pretty amazing. I usually always advocate. I say I hope a lot of NCOs or just enlisted can understand officer selection process, because for me coming up, I was over 13 Bravo back at Fort Sill. when the lieutenant shows up, right? I mean, just a lieutenant. We don't understand exactly what a lieutenant or what it goes through to become an officer. And I saw it firsthand when I was teaching ROTC, and then my couple of trips down to overall West Point. What was it like for you, sir, going through West Point? Not just the academic part of it, but it's not like a regular college, right? I mean, it is a college, it's a university, but it's a little bit different compared to University of South Carolina, different organizations. So,
Yeah.
how was it for you? How were you able to navigate West Point successfully?
So, West Point, I've got West Point, all the federal service academies, whether it's Army, Navy, Air Force, even the Merchant Marine Academy, the Coast Guard Academy are kind of interesting places. And then, of course, you have what you're familiar with. You have the Reserve Officer Training Corps, and then you have what's called the Senior Military College. Here in South Carolina, we have the Citadel, for example,
Citadel.
Virginia Military Institute, and Texas A&M. My two sons both went to Virginia Tech, which has a Corps of Cadets. But the process to become an officer through one of the service academies is a little bit different because you are kind of immersed in that environment for 4 years, and it's designed to do a couple. One, it's a great education. It's a wonderful education, and it is quote free in the sense that you're not having to pay tuition, but you're gonna serve. But what it also does, probably more importantly, is it really is. It's designed to imbue in you this sense of the model of the military: duty, honor, and country. The honor code is an important component of West Point. Cadet will not lie, cheat, or steal, and will tolerate those who do. The intent of our 4 years is to try to immerse in you this sense of service and holding to ideals and uphold. Now, does it work 100% of the time? Absolutely not. And there's always unfortunate folks who fail to do that. But I think by and large, for the Army, at least, I think West Point is often referred to as the soul of the Army. It's kind of where the Army's heart is in some ways, because one, it's been around, for a couple hundred years, 1802, and it continues to crank out a small, percentage-wise. West Point produces about 1,000 officers a year, and ROTC produces vastly more officers But at the end of the day, West Point is designed not about the individuals; it's about the core, the soul of the Army that is still there in many ways. And it's not saying I've served a lot of officers, West Point, ROTC, Officer Candidate School, who are all some really good ones, and frankly, some ones that were not so good. So sourcing commission really doesn't matter in my view, but what does matter is that the Army needs a place where its heart and soul can be kind of housed, and I think West Point does that for the Army. That's part of the journey. That's what makes it so special in my mind.
Yeah, West Point is just something about it. When you go up there, I mean, is I guess they picked the best landscape to create West Point, right? It's amazing. It's kind of scary as well, but it's something about it, right? I've been to the Citadel, I've been to different places, but when you hit the campus, just the level of history around you so far to see what's going on. For me, I appreciate being there, just observing, just seeing how things work, how officer overall commission. You went through the commission process. Now you were second lieutenant. Hey, here we go. Unfortunately, you became an infantry officer.
Yeah.
But you got to the first unit. What was it like for you? I would like to ask both enlisted and officer when you first got to the unit. How were you received, and how was it like for you trying to really integrate? Now you're not on a university campus anymore, of course. Now you're in the Army now. How was that for you? How did it all go?
Yeah, well, it's just like for anybody. I think it's exciting, it's intimidating, it's all those kind of things. For me, I made this selection to go infantry while I was a cadet at West Point for a whole bunch of reasons. I want to be challenged. So as a graduate of West Point, I went to the infantry officer basic course, then the Ranger School, and then I pop out of the backside. My first assignment was the then just really newly reactivated 10th Mountain Division at Fort Drum, New York. And back in those days, we're talking 1986, 87 timeframe. I was in what was then described as a cohort unit. So in those days, it was an early experiment in the Army about kind of building cohesion in units. And so as a second lieutenant, I showed up in my first unit, and there were no soldiers, really. We were a newly activated battalion. So there was just a cadre, squad leaders, platoon sergeants, first sergeants, and the officers of the battalion. And then that entire cadre went down to Fort Benning, Georgia for what was then called Light Leader Corps. So we went through this kind of 3 weeks. This was right after Ranger School, of course, back to the Ranger training area. And we bonded as a cadre, and I learned a whole bunch because I had these non-commissioned officers who were incredible. I mean, these guys who had come into what was then kind of the light infantry. This was the light infantry units. But I got an opportunity kind of for several weeks early on to kind of link in with non-commissioned officers as a young second lieutenant before my soldiers arrived. And then we got back to Fort Drum, and the soldiers arrived as a cohort. They all came out of basic training together. They arrived together, and for about 2 years, we had a really tight outfit of because we didn't have a lot of replacements. We bonded together very tightly. And in those days, I was very, very fortunate at the time because the 10th Mountain Division, which is probably one of the most deployed divisions in the Army these days, we were really just standing it up. And so all we did was train, and we had some amazing training. I mean, we would do live fires and go to Panama, go to the National Training Center, the Joint Readiness Training Center, some remarkable opportunities as a young officer to do things at a level and at a repetition, which I think was really important for my growth and certainly helped me down the line as I got a chance to become more senior and try to do the same sort of thing with my units. But it was a remarkable experience, and I was very fortunate. I mean, there's still a couple of non-commissioned officers back in those days who are, I'll never forget. They were my trainers as a second lieutenant. It's amazing, and I still look back at those guys and amazed that they tolerated me. And at the same time allowed me to lead, but I think at the same time we're always kind of guiding me in a way, and that was really important.
Yeah, there's a unique relationship, right, between that non-commissioned officer and that officer. I mean, across all ranks, all responsibility, whatever the case may be. From your point of view, from your vantage point, how would you describe, the U.S. Army non-commissioned officer corps? Because you serve at the junior level and then the senior level and then all the way up to a 2-star general. I mean, from your evolution through the Army to where you transition, how you describe the in terms of the level of leaders the Army in terms of now is developing, because things have changed, right? Because when you came in back in the days, things were a little bit different compared to the NCOs we have now. How will you describe it, and what are some things you think we can do to terms of make our non-commissioned officer corps better at our level?
Yeah, so it's a great question, but I would offer this because I've had the opportunity as a senior officer to travel across the world, and I've engaged with other armies all over Asia and the Middle East, et cetera, like you and others have as well. And I tell you, without exaggeration, what makes the United States Army the best in the world is not the equipment we have. It really is about non-commissioned officers. I mean, what we empower non-commissioned officers to do in our Army is rather unique. There are armies that try to copy us in that, but few can match. The non-commissioned officer education system, which evolves over time, it is a gem. It's world class, and it's a national treasure. So I think what makes the Army so important, and I think to some degree the other services as well, but the Army is rather unique, and maybe the Marine Corps, because the role of the non-commissioned officer, in industry, you call that kind of the foreman. You need a foreman on the line to manage the workforce. And that's what the non-commissioned officer does for the Army. But at the same time, that foreman, if you will, that non-commissioned officer is also the same guy or gal that's really training junior officers, kind of the management, if you will. And they're at the same time, they're the ones that are, protecting, guiding, supporting those young soldiers, and very importantly, identifying the next cadre of non-commissioned officers. And we empower non-commissioned officers to do that. I mean, localized promotion in the Army to the rank of E6 to staff sergeant, is done at the unit level, and it's really managed by the non-commissioned officer corps. And that's, if you think about it, Sam, that's what defines a profession. This is about a profession. A profession has its own code of values. It polices itself. It has a unique body of knowledge. That's the United States Army non-commissioned officer corps, regardless of MOS. And your second part of your question is an important one as well. What's changed? I think that the beauty of the non-commissioned officer corps is that it has been able to evolve over time as the Army's requirements have evolved. Well, but at the same time, is still very, very proud, and I would say appropriately jealously proud of itself, and protects itself in a way that is rather unique, much different than the officer corps. I mean, it really is the NCO corps. I think what makes it continue to make it good, and I think continue to make it better, is its flexibility. And I think if there is a concern moving forward, is you don't want the non-commissioned officer corps to view themselves, they've got to become more officer-like.
Officer.
You
Yep.
know, you got. It's fine to pursue education, all those kind of things. That helps, but we got to remember at the end of the day, the non-commissioned officer corps is the folks who are out there. They're guiding soldiers. They're maintaining standards. They're the ones who are getting done in the trenches, if you will. Um, and I think that's what makes us unique, and frankly, makes our non-commissioned officer corps the envy of any army in the world. And I say that without exaggeration.
Yeah, so the same question applies to junior level officers, right? Because we have those ISP lieutenants, first, second, captain. We can report a major in there because now you a major, you feel grade officer.
Mhm.
How will you? What are some advice or some recommendation you can give to those junior officers who working alongside with their as far as respective non-commissioned officer, not because they are at the direct level now making things happen. Because I've seen a lot of junior officers, even at the major levels, kind of struggle because they really don't know how to navigate that relationship piece or how to help and train and guide overseas in terms of their respective company or even as a staff officer. So far, what are some things where you say, when you come through the ranks you did at your level as a staff officer for major or captain that made you successful in your military career?
Yeah, so I think I think for a junior officer, and I think you're right, a company grade officer in particular. It's interesting. My son, who's a senior captain now, I have this conversation with him periodically. I think it's important for a young officer to come into an organization and one recognize that non-commissioned officer wants that officer to say, "Hey, I'm in charge. I'm the commander. I'm the platoon leader." That's important. And what makes again the non-commissioned officer so unique is they're they are they want to be subordinated to that officer, but at the same time, they recognize they have a unique role. And so the really good non-commissioned officers, can persuade and guide in a way that makes the officer going to grow in their own authority in that process. And I think that's what you really see the good non-commissioned. And the most amazing rank in the Army, in my view, is platoon sergeant. I mean, that's where it's because
I agree.
by the time you become a first sergeant, you're working with a company commander. Company commander's been around a few years and it's got a couple things figured out. But man, I'll tell you what, a sergeant first class platoon sergeant who's dealing with a second lieutenant coming out of ROTC or West Point or OCS, and sometimes less OCS because a lot of those guys come out of the field, but certainly West Point and ROTC, man, that's amazing because you think about it, that sergeant first class is what 30, early 30s maybe, maybe a couple years old that, but the early 30s, and you got that junior officer who's probably 22, 23. There's probably a 9, 10 year age gap in some places. Man, that's maturity of leadership right there to be able to do that. That's parenting at the PhD level in some ways. And I would just offer one other thing, and I would offer to say I think every good officer you see, and also every poor officer you see, has likely been influenced positively or negatively by a non-commissioned officer. We're fortunate the vast majority positively, and the officers who tend to flame out early, often in my experience, you kind of diagnose an issue, you find out they haven't been well served by an NCO someplace. That's been so it puts a lot of responsibility on the NCO Corps because in many ways they are. I mentioned West Point as being the soul of the Army. The non-commissioned officer corps is without question is the heart of the Army.
Yeah, so you made some very good point because I've always advocated to folks again that there is a unique relationship between that non-commissioned officer and that officer. For me, I was very fortunate enough to have some real good outstanding officer because it's the same thing, right? It's not just about officers learning from non-commissioned officers, but I learned a lot from my officer that I served alongside with because we realized here we came to agree that it's all about organization. Of course, the soldier make the organization. It's all about the soldiers, not about you, sir, or me. It's all about the organization. And I've seen in the past where there's always a conflict sometimes where that non-commissioned officer don't know his or her role. You're not a commander. You're not in charge. He or she, the officer, in charge, of course. And how do you navigate that? So as you went through the ranks, sir, from a company, a battalion, a brigade, if we can just talk below the brigade level for now, if you don't mind. How was that transition for you? Because you had the opportunity to coach, guide, and mentor a lot of officers and non-commissioned officers as well. How
Yeah,
were you able to shape your leadership philosophy at that level? Because we discussed the enterprise level is a little bit different, right? Because now you a division commander, and that's a little bit different from a 3,000 vantage point. But if we speak from a brigade level below, how is mentorship important to you, and how you think folks should go about in terms of requesting a mentor? Because for me, I have both enlisted and officer as mentors for me.
yeah. That's a great question. And as you well know, the mentor-mentee relationship is a dual relationship. You can't impose mentorship on somebody. You really have to be accepted by a mentee in some ways.
Hmm.
And I think mentors evolve for officers, both from the non-commissioned officers sometimes and from the officer side. I've had both in my career, and both have served different roles. I think what's interesting that as a journey, you kind of go from, I was the major officer kind of echelons, platoon leader, company command, battalion command, brigade command, kind of at that level below. What makes those interesting unique is, as a platoon leader in the Army, different than the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps, they call them platoon commanders. And in the Army, we call them platoon leaders. You don't command till you're a captain in the Army, till you're a company or a battery or a troop commander in the Army. And that's important because command has unique legal authorities that don't exist in any other, frankly, in any other industry. It is a unique legal authority through the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Platoon leaders don't have that. Platoon leaders are making advice, providing advice to commanders, and those non-commissioned officers, both at the sergeant first class level and the first sergeant level, are in some ways, and a good officer will turn to them and use them as a mentor. I was very fortunate, certainly at the company command level. Command Sergeant Major Simo Villa from American Samoa in Hawaii was an absolute. The guy was. I don't know how he managed me because he was amazing.
It's a full-time job, huh?
Command Sergeant Major, he's a hero. But they're silently whispering, kind of not silent, they're whispering in your ear about sort of things, and then and because a company commander doesn't have a staff. It's really the commander, it's the first sergeant, maybe the executive officer, kind of the key component of that process. When you go to battalion level, though, everything changes because battalion commanders have staffs, and they have a command sergeant major who is without question the most unique rank, I think, in any of the services because of the role they have. And so the battalion commander, and this is kind of just a little bit of leadership theory. You're familiar. You have three echelons of leadership. You've got direct leadership. You have organizational level leadership. You have kind of strategic leadership. Direct leadership is I tell you what to do, and you tell me. That's kind of direct. And I generally know all my soldiers by name, and certainly through company command, you have direct leadership. You probably know all the troopers in your organization, and it's direct. It's provided. At the battalion level, it becomes a little more organizational level, and that's where the command sergeant major is so important because the command sergeant major is still able to look kind of through the company's troops and batteries in a way. But the commander is providing some direct leadership through the staff, is also providing organizational level direction to the outfit. And then things evolve at the brigade level a little bit more, but there's you're teetering at kind of the organizational level piece where you're putting policies out, those kind of things. And you may not be as involved directly with individual soldiers, but the policies you're putting out for the entire organization help drive it. And those are important. And I think good non-commissioned officers, good officers recognize, though, that where they've been training or not specifically, but they recognize intuitively, particularly at the NCO level, kind of those different pieces. And by the time you become a battalion command sergeant major, of course, you are, you've been around a long time, and you've kind of winnowed through the needle selection to that pinnacle rank at the NCO level. And those guys and gals are worth their weight in gold, and frankly is what keeps battalions, brigades, divisions, corps going all the time. So really important stuff.
Thanks for sharing that, sir. I've always had a very huge appreciation, right, for just a brigade command team because, like you said, right, you have a brigade, you have a time below then in terms of how things are going to work and what the brigade command is doing. Throughout your career, becoming a general officer is a big deal. I cannot express it. I've been a general officer before in my life. So how was it, sir? Honestly, now, you are your brigade time, there's a staff time. Now you a general officer now.
Yeah.
A lot of things change.
Well,
Lots of things change.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's important to recognize, there are a lot of really great colonels out there who, could be fantastic general officers, and there's a very small number gets selected to become general. So there's obviously there's merit involved, of course, but there's also a little bit of luck and time. That's just the way the process works, and I think that happens at any strategic level, at the corporate level, else. But if you're going to move up to kind of corporate senior level leadership, you got to be kind of fortunate in terms of who you've worked with, who you're around, and who's kind of making the succession selection, that kind of process. And the Army general officer selection process is not dissimilar to that in some ways. So there is a little bit of luck and timing involved, and I was very fortunate on that process. But having said that, I think, by and large, I think the Army and the other services, flag officers, I think, for the uninitiated, for those who are not in the military, kind of can become a caricature in some ways. You'll see them on the medians, or they this caricature of kind of these automatons at the general officer, admiral level, which is just not real. It's just not accurate. I mean, and the same applies that the selected non-commissioned officers, these command sergeant majors who are selected as well. These guys and gals have gone through these processes, and as you know, it takes. I mean, I was promoted to general officer as a young brigadier general, and I had been in the Army at that point for 26 years. 25 or 26 years. I mean, it had been a long time. So it's not as if you just kind of pop out and you become a flag officer. You get decades of experience in this process. And I think that's important to recognize, because there is, with few exceptions, the Army and the military doesn't have lateral entry. In the corporate world, lateral entry is very common. You bring in executives from outside the organization to do things. But we grow our own because it's a profession, and professions need to many cases that. So lateral entry is minimized in the military. So by the time when you become a general officer, you have gone through kind of a whole series of winnowing, and I think 95% of the time we do the right thing. Occasionally you'll find generals behaving badly, but the fact is most, I think, do a wonderful job, and they're dedicated to the profession. They're dedicated to the nation. They know they serve the Constitution, and I think those are all really important things that again are makes our military in many ways the envy of the world. And it's, again, none of that has to do with equipment. None of that's about equipment. All that's about people, which is what frankly makes professions tick, is the people, not the things.
That's pretty good putting this there. So now you are general officer now, because throughout your entire career you didn't have the opportunity to select your own senior enlisted advisor.
Right.
Now you're general officer. Now you have to select somebody, right? And I think I expressed this to somebody in the past. I went through the entire nominating process myself, and I had some reservations. I'm gonna keep that to myself. It's just me. So what is for you, as you, once you're selecting your senior enlisted advisor, not as far as the process, but you as the person who's selecting that CSM or that sergeant major,
Yeah.
what are some things where you're looking for? I mean, of course, the organization, is there. You want he or she to be competent, because whoever is selected to serve, or whoever is selected to be interviewed on a nominated slate, he or she is competent. Competency is there, because the paperwork talked about is there. But for you, what were you looking for? Say, I want to select a senior enlisted advisor. These are my 3-4 things I want he or she to meet, or at least, focus in these 3 or 4 categories.
Yeah, first there's got to be compatibility. You've got to feel that you can communicate with one another. I mean, that's important. I think that's the first thing. You've got to understand, can you have this conversation and feel you get compatible and communicate with one another? I think it's also important to select somebody who you feel it will speak, quote, truth to power. You need somebody at the nominative level who's willing to walk into your office. Because I'll tell you, at the end of the day, I've said this before, as a commander, the only 2 people in an organization who care everything about the organization is the commander and the senior non-commissioned leader. And so when you get to the nominative level, you need a non-commissioned officer to walk into your office and kind of say to you, "Hey, sir, you got this screwed up." It's at that point the rank just disappears. It's 2 senior leaders, two people who are communicating, but with different lanes and kind of different pieces. So I think that what I was looking for, that was, do I feel I have got somebody who can walk in and kind of tell me what I need, what I need to hear, not necessarily what I want to hear. And at the same time, someone who, implicitly when the decision is made, will go out and make sure it gets executed. And I would offer, I think you said it right. And I'll tell you what, the Sergeant Major of the Army and the others that provide the slates for the nominative process do a really good job. I mean, I have yet to see a slate where there was an incredible talent. You could find that right individual from that slate. That's a credit again to the way the Sergeants Major of the Army have put that process together.
So what are some advice you gave a CN non-commissioned officer in terms of CSM, sergeant major, who had interest to be as far as the nominated CSM? Because from a CSM standpoint, there's no guardrail. I mean, just do your job, do what you're supposed to do. It's going to happen, right? But there's nothing that say, okay, I'm preparing this guy, this girl. These are the things you need to do to become a nominated CSM. Of course, there are certain assignments and positions you have to serve in based on policy. I mean, we fully understand that. But from an officer who has been observing the enlisted population for over 34 years. And so what would you say make a good as far as nominative CSN or just a CNI commissioner officer? What are some traits you think he or she should, as far as demonstrate, at least possess to become that successful?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, it's obviously anybody who's at the nominative level has some ambition, and ambition is good. Ambition fuels kind of drive. That's important. But at the same time, unchecked ambition is toxic to an organization. So I think the first thing I'd tell a non-commissioned officer who is considering the nominative process, hey, recognize that, that you're not the only guy or gal out here who can do this job. You're going to be on a slate. And at the end of the day, someone's going to select you or not select you. And it's not personal. I mean, it's not a reflection. So you've got to be comfortable in the ability of recognizing I may or may not get this job in the process, and can't walk away from that thinking, I've lost my identity because I didn't get selected. And at the end of the day, I think it's important for the nominative. So I may not say for the general officer is to recognize, hey, you're there to serve soldiers or the joint force. I mean, this really is not about you. You're going to be a caretaker for a couple of years, and then, like you, I've been retired now for 5 years. I wake up every day and I'm amazed that the Army has been able to survive without me. I mean, I think you got to recognize the Army is going to survive without you. And so
it's going to keep going on.
A couple of years, and you've got to go into this selflessly in the process. And if you let your ambition get ahead of your sense of duty and selflessness, you're probably hitting the point of your career where it's, you're probably no longer the right guy or gal for that position. And that's hard. And the good ones, and most of them are good ones, kind of get that and move on. And here's the other last thing I was saying. I've seen slates, nominative slates. I'll give you an example. When I was a division level commander, I selected a command sergeant major as the division CSM behind, as was coming behind me. One of the guys I did not select, a year later popped out on another list and was selected. So the reality is, if you're on one nominative slate and don't get picked up, there's a strong likelihood you're going to wind up on another slate and wind up getting picked up someplace else, at least in my experience. And I think that's because those NCOs who do that recognize it's not about them. It's about the organization and what's best for the soldiers and the leaders of the organization.
Great point, sir. You're absolutely right. It's all about organizations, all about the soldiers, and it's all based on timing, right? You have to be patient, let the process take its course. So you serve as a division commander. That's at the enterprise level, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
How will you compare? Because you've been within as far as the civilian sector for a couple of years now. How will you compare a division level commander and now to not the current position you're in, right? Because we're going to discuss as far as your current role here, but just want to compare and contrast in terms of the level of responsibilities, but really the styles of leadership. Because now you are a division commander, you have command authority compared to now you're in the civilian sector, you working for somebody else, you're a director or something else. Now it's a little bit different. How were you able to change or transition or transform your leadership style from being a division commander to serving a two-star level position? Now you're in the civilian sector, serving in a position that you don't have no command authority.
Yeah, I'll tell you, in my mind, the biggest thing is that as you get to kind of at the level, kind of high level operational strategic level, it's less about what you're telling people, it's more about what questions you're asking. And the important thing is what question to ask, not what to tell, because in many cases, what you at the senior level, whether it's at the strategic level in the Army or whether it's in the civilian world, the reality is there's things going by you're not seeing. So your intuition may not serve you the same way it did when you were a battalion commander or a battalion CSM. It's important at this point to recognize it's what I don't know that's important. So the way you get that is you ask questions and you let people bring you information and kind of go through the decision process. So what I find is at the very senior levels, it's often about what questions you ask, not about what direction you give necessarily. That's part of the process of going through understanding what problem am I really trying to solve here? What is the issue that's confronting me? What are the environmental factors that I don't even see that are out there that are affecting, shaping the decision or shaping the issue? And I was fortunate because I didn't command a traditional numbered division. I didn't command the 25th Infantry. I commanded Division East and 1st Army, which worked with the Guard and the Reserve. So was another with Compo 2 and Compo 3, who I didn't grow up in. And my organization was distributed. I had 5 brigades over multiple states across, so that required a different kind of approach to leadership that was new to me. And And I really had to ask questions of these commanders and sergeants major, at Fort Stewart or Camp Shelby, Mississippi, or Camp Atterbury, Indiana, because I wasn't there to feel it. I really had to rely and understand through their lens what they were seeing to help me make decisions that were going to affect the entire organization, not just the kind of the tactical level where they were working.
So that was going to be my next point, right? Because what we talk about in the military decision making is a process. How would you went about making those critical decisions? What are some things that you have? Because some folks require all the facts to make a
Yeah.
decision that's going to affect the organization or whatever the case may be. What were some things that you use, or what are some requirements you saw? Okay, these are my requirements, to make my decision. What was your decision making process? How you got to making critical decisions as you led troops?
It's actually what's important, I think, to recognize, the military decision-making process is really no different than the corporate decision-making process that they teach at the Harvard Business School. The language is different, but the process is the same. And both those processes start off, as you know, with mission analysis. And mission analysis is really understanding the issue and really kind of distilling out what problem am I trying to solve, what is the mission I'm trying to, what is the task, and what is the purpose I'm trying to accomplish. And then importantly, what assumptions am I making in that process? And as you get more senior, I think what I've found is that you got to spend a lot more time, really distilling what is the problem I'm trying to solve, what is the mission statement, if you will, and importantly, probably most importantly, not just the facts, but what are the assumptions you're making? Because assumptions, as you know, assumptions can make an ass out of you or me. The reality is,
Absolutely.
assumptions are really critical, and we do it all the time, and we don't even do it without even noticing. We make assumptions about things. And when you're at a level where, the problem sets are really complex, the reality is your assumptions can make you or break you. Because if your assumption proves to be not valid, then you may come up with a bad outcome. But this all starts with what we describe as the mission analysis. And that's the most important process of the decision-making process. Course of action development, course of action analysis, and selection and execution are rather easy. It starts off with, and I'll tell you, you see just world events right now. I mean, the most important, at the very strategic level, this gets into strategies, the ends, ways, and means. And it always starts, what ends am I trying to achieve? What am I trying to accomplish here? And I think as you move at more senior levels in the military and in the civilian world, really understanding what is the problem, what are the objectives I'm trying to accomplish, and what assumptions am I making as part of my decision process.
Yeah, that's a key point, sir. Because as for me, being a non-commissioned officer, advising my officers, I think I've always wanted to make sure that I understand the subject matter. Because if I'm going to give you, as far as objective in terms of advice recommendation, I should know the hell I'm talking about, right? Because I've seen many occasions where you have seen enlisted who, advise the commander but have no idea what's going on. How can you provide that as far objective in terms of advice to that commander if you got no problem, no understanding what's happening, and how can you in terms of not help shape his overall decision, but at least give him or her the tool necessary to say, okay, I can look at this subject, this problem set from a different lens and make those critical overall decisions. Want to transition, sir, if you don't mind, in terms of division commander time in the Pentagon over at AFRICOM. You have vast knowledge and experience in different capacity. I mean, you're doing big things out there. Now you had a transition. Now transition is a critical part of every service member life. It's very, very critical. How was that for you? And I know it's different, right? Transitioning as a general officer compared to a low enlisted. As a general officer, have to write like a resume and do a job interview, and how was it for you, and how did you navigate your overall transition process?
So it's hard. It was hard. I mean, it's hard for me. It's still hard in some ways. I mean, when you spend 34 years, and if you add 4 years at West Point, 38 years of my life in a uniform, and all of a sudden, you got to be careful. You can lose your identity when you leave that culture. I mean, it's a culture shock. And I think at the end of the day, it really took me a couple or 3 years going through the process of becoming comfortable that I was no longer in the Army in some ways. My wife and I kind of joke about this all the time. She says, because you're not in the Army anymore.
Keep reminding you, right?
Yeah, transition is hard because you are losing your identity in some ways. And so I think this is where the transition process, it helps. This is where mentorship and outreach really does matter. This is where it does become important for you to network. And you hear about it all the time in the transition. You got to network. So, I mean, resumes are important, those kind of things. But at the end of the day, what's most important in the transitions process is expanding your network. Your network when you transition starts off with those you know. And frankly, for me, it may have been guys and gals that had transitioned before me, but they came from the military. But what I found within a year or so of that, I was expanding my network to people who had never served in the military. And that's where it gets really rich because they bring perspective and experiences to you and insights that you just don't know because it's not in our culture in the military. And I found that's the most important thing of the transition process is it's not about resumes. It's not about what to wear to the interview. It's not, all those are important. What's really important is you know, meeting people and engaging with people about what they're doing to learn from that. You've heard the term, of course, in the informational interview process. I mean, what I would tell anybody when you transition, go out and talk to people, call it an informational interview, talk to them what they're doing. You know, how do they come to what they're doing? What are they doing in terms of their daily agenda? What's the culture like in the organization they live in? I will tell you one quick story. When I transitioned out of the Army, I learned some hard lessons about culture, about organizational culture. And one of the things I learned, quite frankly, is in the military, largely trust is implicit. We trust one another because of our profession. You may not like somebody in the military, but it's rare that you don't trust them. I mean, trust is kind of implicit because we're professionals. Trust in the civilian world sometimes has to be earned, not given. And I've learned that the hard way a couple of times, and it's an important lesson. But it reflects the fact that it's just a cultural it's a cultural change, and culture is hard sometimes, and I think that's the hard part about transition, which is why networking and outreach and finding somebody you trust and can mentor really does become even more important when you take off the uniform.
Thanks for sharing that, sir. You made a very good point, and you were absolutely right. I think networking and just getting outside of your comfort zone can play huge, huge dividends because I had to learn the hard way when I transitioned out because, you are being a leader, you have some level of education, some level of experience. The preconceived notion here is that once I get out, there'll be folks lining up to hire me or provide me some level of opportunity. It don't work that way. So you are absolutely right. You have the network. You got to get out there and not just network within your current, as far as ecosystem, I call it, but outside of your ecosystem, folks who have never served, you could have different perspective in terms and provide you and link you with different folks that can assist you. So I want to talk about something that I love to talk about. Really, is Department of Veterans Affairs. I love that department personally because initially I had a preconceived notion that's like most veterans, right, are just folks who serve. The VA is this, the VA is that, because if you don't understand what the VA consists of,
Right.
and a lot of folks believe the VA is just one entity. Of course, one entity is but divided into three different parts, right? You have the VBA, the Veteran Benefit Administration, VHA, the Veteran Healthcare Administration, and the third part, of course, the National Cemetery Administration.
Yep.
So sometimes folks just put all in one pot, the VA, the VA, the VA, the VA, VA. And you're currently serving as the Secretary of Veterans Affairs for the state of South Carolina. That's serving over 360, I think even more than that, veteran, because a lot of folks are retiring to the state of South Carolina, which is a wonderful place. And I can profess to you here is that I do believe our VA is the best VA so far. It just means personally because I've talked to veterans, I've had opportunity to work there, and I saw those employees and what they do day in and day out to make sure they change the lives of veterans. So just want to turn it over to you. So what is the veteran Department of Veterans Affairs does? What is its mission? What is its goal? And what are some things that you're working on so far to prove the lives of the veteran within the states of South Carolina, sir?
So yeah, so first of all, I think it's important. So at the state level, we do four basic functions. First, we assist veterans gain the benefits that they're entitled to, and I say this all the time. Entitlement is a statutory term. You are entitled to certain benefits from the U.S. government because of your service. It's not like you're getting taken away from somebody else. You're entitled to this. So we assist in that process. We in South Carolina, we advocate for the active duty military in South Carolina as well. We have 68,000 active duty military in this state, plus family members at 8 military bases. We advocate for them with state government to recognize what's the state's role in supporting that active duty presence in South Carolina. That's important culturally. It's important from a national security standpoint. It's important for those military families as well who are transient through our state sometimes. The third thing is we do a lot of work on outreach and informing veterans and those who talk with veterans about the veteran community. And I'll just offer this. The veteran population in the United States is declining by about 1.6% per year. Here in South Carolina, it's declining about 1% per year. The veterans, because the military's gotten smaller, the number of veterans naturally is declining. So part of the role we have to amplify that veteran voice in South Carolina. It's an important piece. We got to help the General Assembly and others recognize what veterans bring to the table. And I say this all the time: veterans produce more than they consume. And one of the challenges that we get out there is if people begin to get this narrative that veterans are have post traumatic stress, they're homelessness, they're all these, and that's true for a small segment of veterans. But the reality is most veterans are punched way above their weight class in terms of what they're bringing to the community, and you're a good example of that. And the fourth thing we do is we try to integrate entities that support veterans, the nonprofit community, the VA, local governments, to weave together to help them connect. It's networking. We try to build a network to help veterans get the services that they need. But I will offer one thing. It's important to back to the VA. What I tell all veterans is foundationally the first place you need to go is to file your VA disability claim and get enrolled in VA healthcare. I mean, that's the most important thing you do, whether you come with a 0% disability rating or a 100% disability rating. That's important because the VA is not going away. The nonprofit community will ebb and flow based on finances and everything else. But at the end of the day, the VA is here to stay. And that's an important piece because you're right, it has changed. And unfortunately, I meet with veterans, particularly older Vietnam era veterans who I sometimes describe, they gave the middle finger to the VA in 1973 because it was a different VA then. And we spend time trying to pull them back in. The good news is veterans of our generation largely have had positive experience with the VA. It's not perfect, but it's largely positive. And that's an important foundational basis to build your post-service career off of is your linkage with the VA. And I'm very proud of it. And frankly, that's what we spend a lot of time trying to help veterans find their way to the VA and also recognize the state can provide a little more kind of personalized care because we're smaller. We're a small state, 393,000 veterans in the state, but that's not 18 million. It's a number that we can work with. So it's all important stuff. So it's an important role. We're really proud of it.
So when it's all said and done, what exactly are you trying to? I don't want to use the term your legacy, right? As the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. When it's all said and done, I mean, of course, you want to provide service to veterans and service members and the family with their as far as required benefits. What are you trying to accomplish overall when it's all said and done? When you leave that position here in the near future or the far future, when it's all said and done, what would you like to see?
Yeah, that's an important question. I'll tell you what I personally want to do is I want to continue to people to recognize the value veterans bring to their community. I'm very proud of my service. I'm proud of the service of the folks I've served with. And I really believe they represent the best America has. Now, there's lots of great Americans who didn't serve, and that's fine. But the fact of the matter is, those who put their name on the dotted line to go out and serve, whether they served in combat or not, the fact of the matter is they serve this nation, and they continue to serve when they transition. So, what I want to do is people recognize that veterans in South Carolina and elsewhere are a good bet. Veterans bring three things to the table for employers. And I always got to say this. Number one, they're disciplined because of military service. Second, they know how to work on a team. And thirdly, they've been trained on a skill or an attribute they didn't have before they're in the military. That's great raw material for any employer. So what I want to highlight is the value veterans bring to the community, and we should be attracting veterans. And frankly, I tell people in South Carolina, I run the Department of Veterans Affairs. I'm really in the economic development business. My role is to attract talent to this state, for this economy, for the industries that are growing in this state. And that talent, that really good talent, is much made up of veterans. And at the same time, take care of the veterans make sure they get the benefits that they're entitled to. But really, it's about leveraging veteran talent for South Carolina. And there's a lot of things we're trying to do to make that happen. Fortunately, the good news is I'm pushed on an open door most of the time with that because everybody agrees with me. And that's good. But that's what I want to do. I want people to continue to recognize you may not have served the military yourself. That's fine. Your kids may not have served. That's fine too. But at the end of the day, recognize those who have served this nation are great citizens and do great work for their communities. And we will be better for leveraging their talents after they leave the military, just like they provide us that service while they're in the military.
I appreciate you, sir. What would you say to a veteran out there, Sam Zoker, who is somewhat reluctant, right, to go to the VA and file a claim because we came across a lot of them. I don't want to go to the VA; they take too long, and I just don't want to go. What would be your recommendation to that veteran? Say, hey, if you have some reservation, this is some things I recommend you do in terms of getting the service, in terms of the compensation and health care that is required to you by law.
Yeah, well, first thing, first of all, younger veterans who are what I describe as digital natives, not digital immigrants like me. I mean, the reality is a younger veteran could go right online and file their entire claim online without ever interface with a person, the human being in many ways. You could do that now, and a lot of people do that already. So my recommendation is, hey, listen, file your claim online or go see a county Veterans Affairs officer or come to the state, go to our website, at scdva.gov and find us and we'll help you link and we'll help you link to those benefits. It's what I find is tragic, Sam. In some cases, you'll find my father served in the Navy in the 1950s, had never filed his VA claim. He's 93 years old. He's still living. And we finally got him to file that claim last year. And, he got a 10% disability for hearing loss based on his naval service around airplanes. I mean, that's a tragedy. And I feel bad for that because, that's like a veteran today, which we can't let that happen. We got to get veterans to file with a VA because, you may not need those benefits today, but I can assure you when you become, 85, 90 years old, you'll want those, and your family will want those, deserves those as well. So, I tell folks, and what I would love to see is automatic enrollment in the VA when you transition to the military. I think that's a legal issue at the federal level. Hopefully you get there. But right now, what I tell transition service members, I know you want to get out, and I know you want to get off the uniform, and you want to put the military experience behind you for a while. But take the time on the way out to get enrolled in the VA and recognize this. And this, the PACT Act that passed a couple years ago. The PACT Act made enrollment in veterans health care almost automatic for many, many veterans of our generation who served overseas. And that's a really important act. And it gives them access to a health care option that most Americans don't have because they haven't served. And the VHA, the Veterans Health Administration, is the largest healthcare enterprise in this nation, probably in the world, actually. And so I tell them, help. Contact us. We'll help you do it, and but you got to do it. It's an important piece, and because if you don't, you're disadvantaging yourself and for an entitlement you have earned. It's yours. It's something that you deserve. So I tell people, file your disability claim, enroll in VHA, and we'll help you do it if you need help.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks for sharing that, just the story of your dad, because I came across many, many veterans who served back in the old days who somewhat reluctant to file a claim because, it's just there's somebody else use it.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't need it. There's somebody else use it. They don't want to go through not just the process. They just don't want to do it because it's just, they're calling or duty to serve. They said, no, I don't think I earn it. I don't. Yeah, a lot of them I spoke to. I said, no, you did earn it. If something wrong with you, go talk to somebody, get your claim processed, get your claim filed, and you can be, get some treatment for it.
Sam, it's like you said, it's an entitlement. It's you don't deserve it. You're entitled to it. Congress, and this is where the Congress has appropriated dollars for this, the process. So this came as part of the package deal. When you enlisted in the Army, the big apparatus had already figured out at some point you're going to become a veteran, and so that was taken care of as part of the package. So you're entitled to those pieces. So please file. You're not taking anything away from anybody. The only person you're taking something away from if you don't file it is yourself.
It's yourself.
That's right. Yeah.
Thanks, Steph. I appreciate you, sir. Well, a couple of questions, sir. I know you got a lot of things going on. I don't want to keep you hostage on you all day. Something different you would do, or something different you would tell a young, Lieutenant Todd out there. Say, hey, if I was to do this all over again, what would you do different as a lieutenant or a major or a captain or general officer? What would you done different?
Yeah. I mean, what I would do is realize when a door closes, it often closes. And so if you see an opportunity and you're concerned about, take the risk. Be a risk taker when you're young, because you're resilient at that point. So take risks. And I'm not talking like risks of jumping off cliffs or anything. I'm talking risks, professional risk. Pursue the assignment that you don't think you can get. Go after those things. And I've been very fortunate because people are encouraging me to do things along the way. But, you always look back and say, man, that was a road I didn't take. And that I don't know what would have happened had I done that. So I would encourage people, keeping up in mind. I talked to my son now, as I mentioned, the captain, who's looking at some career transitions, staying in the Army, but some changes in his career pattern in the Army. Maybe different ones that I would take, but sort of the right ones for him. And my advice to guys like him and gals are, take those opportunities and take a little bit of risk in your process. That's what I would encourage younger people to do. The good news is today, of course, they're so much more well informed than I was.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's so many sources of information coming at them, and that we didn't have. I certainly didn't have when I was a young officer, and I think that's so I'd say take a little bit of risk and get out there and stretch yourself a bit.
Recommendation, advice for a service member transitioning into corporate America. What would you say to them? Because a lot of folks will have two different, line we want to walk, right? Some folks want to transition, work within the GS as far as to work for the federal government. Some folks want to completely detach and work within the civilian sector in corporate America from their experience working within the corporate America at the enterprise level, state government, local government, and federal government. What advice would you give a person who's considering going into corporate America?
So I tell people when they leave the military, I call it the three shuns, and you've got three real big areas you got to consider on. How much you want it, what's your desired level of compensation, what's your desired location, and what's your desired vocation. What do you want to do? Where do you want to live? And how much you want to make? And so what you often find is if you really want to, if you think you're worth a whole bunch of money, you want to make that, you may have to find, I got to be really flexible location and even career field that I wanted to go into. If you're focused on the location, you may find you're more limited in kind of the compensation and the vocation piece because of the job opportunities. So what I tell people when they transition is recognize you got these kind of three buckets. You got to decide what's priority to you and your family, and then pursue that piece and have some flexibility. So if you decided, hey, I want to be in South Carolina, and you may have to say, you may not make $300,000 a year. You may not make $100,000 a year, but you got to decide these kind of things that are important in that process. And I think that's an important piece. And the other people I tell folks is again, goes back to recognizing opportunities will come that you didn't see coming. I'm in this job now, not because I saw it. This job was nowhere near on my radar screen. An opportunity was presented and I was asked to consider it, and I found it's really good. And it scratched my itch in terms of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to serve. But I think transition service members got to consider that this location, vocation, and compensation kind of balancing piece to figure out, what does that mean in terms of your process, and be realistic about those things. And that's an important piece that all of us have got to come to as we transition out of the military.
Appreciate you, sir. A couple more questions before I let you go, sir. Best leadership advice someone has given you?
Wow. I think as you get more senior, trust your gut. I mean, trust yourself. Be true. Be principled. Live based on principle and values, and then make decisions based on that first. I think that's I've had a number of folks who, and I think the other one is, and I had a guy who I respect who's always been kind of my mentors. Don't believe your own press, particularly as you get successful. In the military, because it's it's up or out kind of process. The longer you stay in, the more you rise. You can begin to believe your own press and think, I'm all that in a bag of chips. And I go back to my comment. At the end of the day, for every general officer, there's probably 20 colonels who weren't selected who could have been selected as well. So humility is an undervalued and an understated, particularly in today's world where we promote ourselves on social media. And at the end of the day, I think recognize humility is an important quality, and that we all have to. That's what we got to. So I think don't believe your own press sometimes, and recognize that you're not the only person who could do the job you're doing, and that's there's somebody else out there. You're there because of luck, timing, and merit, of course. But recognize you're not alone in that, and that's important because that keeps you hungry. When you're humble, you don't get comfortable, and I think that's important.
So, best position you serve in and why you think it was the best position?
For me in my military career, battalion command was without question the best career. And it goes back to this process because it's kind of this nexus between direct leadership and organizational leadership. The other thing at battalion command in the military, it's the one position in the military structure where you're most separated from your next level subordinate. So battalion commander is about 16 years in service, 17 years in service. A company commander is 6 or 7 years in service. So you've got this 10-year gap. When you're a brigade commander, your battalion commander is just a couple years younger, one assignment difference from you. But battalion command is this unique level because you have a staff, and you're at the level where you're at the broadest separation in terms of experience from your next level subordinates. And I just found that to be an incredible opportunity. So I will always think battalion command was the best job I ever had in the Army.
I appreciate you, sir. Last final question, sir. And please don't say Schofield Barracks, Hawaii is the best duty station, sir, and why?
That's I got to be honest. My family, we spent 11 years on 3 different assignments in Hawaii, and so for us, Hawaii, whether it's Fort Shafter or Schofield Barracks, will always be kind of top of our list. It's just got a special place for us, and we were privileged to be there 3 different times.
I appreciate you, sir. Again, I just want to say thanks a lot, sir, for your time. Thanks for your leadership. Thanks for leading an outstanding organization like the South Carolina Veterans Affairs. That's a huge organization that is doing some beautiful things for veterans across the state. Really, I've been on multiple as far as outreach. I've seen you out there. I was talking to another friend of mine and talking about as far as the South Carolina Pathfinder program, for which you go all the time and speak. It's a good feeling, right, to see the Secretary of Veterans Affairs for the state that is always out there in the community, talking about the veteran story, talking about who we are as a veteran and how we can give back to the community. But most importantly, you working, your team working tirelessly to make sure that the veterans have a better place in South Carolina, sir. I really appreciate you, sir. But really, thanks for your service, sir. Do you have any last closing comments, sir?
No, Sam, thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate you kind of, providing a forum and a platform to kind of talk about veterans and about the military. So thank you for your service, and thank you for doing this and asking me to come on today. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate you, sir.
Thanks very much.